So, Jesus is healing all, and he's not, and that's the thing Costa Hen, would talk about. They would get enough non-rehearsed people to come forward that there would be people going out in the streets, kind of helping do the advertising, but they were very, very selective in who they would call forward, and try to do that with. It's such a money game that plays. We're small this morning. I hate to even tell this. If this was a bigger, more normal crowd, I probably wouldn't. But I always go back to that 1988 presidential election spoof they did on Saturday Night Live, and that's back when Pat Robertson was running and Bob Dole. You remember Bob Dole had a very crippled hand from war. He was injured in the war. If you notice, he always carried that pen in his hand because his hand was crippled, but he was reduced to just using his left hand. And they're having a presidential debate, and they've got all the people running in 1988 up there. Of course, Dana Carvey's doing H.W. Bush and what have you. And Dan Aykroyd was playing Bob Dole, and the guy playing Pat Robertson, Bob Dole accuses him of being a fake faith healer, and Pat Robertson's defending himself. No, it's not fake, whatever. And Dan Aykroyd takes that pen. He says, "Yeah, well, heal my right arm. just heal it, And of course, Pat couldn't do it. But I thought it was a great point. And I say all this, all the television shows we produced for my show was in a building owned by Pat Robertson, North Star Studios over in Nashville. So I've never met Pat. Of course, he's died now, but there's just so much that's unbiblical about those ministries, and that's not how Jesus healed. It's not how, when you read the accounts, it's not how it was done, and it wasn't done for the purpose of trying to make Israel healthier. The miracles were performed to authenticate the Messiahship of Christ. When the apostles, we talked about this in Sunday school, I mentioned it last week. If you read early in the church, when the apostles, Jesus has ascended, now the church is going to be built by the apostles. You read all kinds of accounts in early Acts where the apostles were performing miracles. But when you get toward the latter epistles and the 30, 40, 50 years down the road, they seem to have lost those gifts. And Paul even acknowledged it. He says, these things are going to cease. Well, why did they get to do it for a little while? It was to authenticate the apostles' authority and message in establishing the church. And that's the purpose of miracles. It's not to make everybody healthy. Guess what? It's been appointed unto man once to what? And I don't care how good a faith healing service you go to. My suggestion is pray. God still heals. He does it through doctors a lot of times now. He does it through knowledge that he's allowed us to gain. I'm not doubting 1 second God can still heal. It's still sovereign. We stand up here and pray at the earlier part of the thing. Why? Because we believe a sovereign God has the power to have an effect and do these things. And sometimes he heals, and sometimes he doesn't heal in this life. He heals in the next life. Not always in this life. And we don't stand up here and make these claims and promises that God has got nothing to do but just wake up every day and hope that your faith is strong enough that he's going to make every sickness and disease go away. So, that gets us to this second miracle today, and I'm going to have to move along pretty quick now. Today we're going to look at the second and third miracles, and the second one starts in Matthew 5, and I'm just going to read it. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, begging him, and saying, Lord, my servant, that's in the New American Standard, that the Greek word is there really is my boy, a very young man, okay? My boy, and Matthew and Luke, by the way, he uses the word doulos. Anybody remember from all my other lessons what does doulos mean? Slave. So what we're talking about is a boy slave. This is not a centurion's biological son. This is his boy slave that's in his household, okay? Everybody got that? How do we know that? Because Luke clarifies it for us. So I'll start this again, just keep that in mind. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, begging him and saying, Lord, my servant's lying paralyzed at home, terribly tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion replied, Lord, or that can be translated, Sir, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, my servant will be healed. For I'm also, and that's slave, okay? My slave will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and he does it. Now when Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those who were following, Truly I say to you, I've not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline, or you can also translate that as dine, at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, Go, it shall be done. And really that's kind of a past tense. It's been done. Okay, he says, go, it's been done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. Now, I do want to give you some added details here when we go to the Luke account. If you put your thumb at Luke 7, again, verse 2, now a centurion's slave who was highly regarded by him was sick and about to die. So we know this isn't a biological son. This is a young male slave in the centurion's household. Verse 3, when he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, asking him to come save the life of his slave. Now, Matthew leaves out that it was actually Jewish elders who were doing the verbal communicating, okay? And in Matthew's mind, and that's not hard to resolve, in Matthew's mind, them saying it on behalf of the centurion was the same as the centurion saying it. Everybody get that? All right? And then Luke adds in this other thing. When they came to Jesus, they strongly urged him, saying, talking about the centurion, he is worthy for you to grant this to him, for he loves our nation, and it was he who built us our synagogue. So you kind of get the whole story here from Luke of what's really going on here. The Jewish elders come to Jesus on the centurion's behalf because there's obviously a lot of there's love and esteem all in the background of this story. Obviously, the centurion held his boy slave in very, very high regard. I don't believe it was his biological son, but it's from his emotions and the way that he was begging Jesus to heal him. He obviously loved him like a biological son. And then you see a lot of love from the Jewish elders toward the centurion. The centurion, they said, he's worthy of you helping him. Now, I think we make a big point out of that because they believe Jesus should heal the centurion's slave boy on the basis of worthiness. Okay? And we got to see what Jesus, we got to go back up here and remind ourselves again of what Jesus said to that. So, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of esteem in all of this. I think it's also very interesting that it is not at all improbable that this centurion was a Samaritan. We do know from other Roman historians that the Roman Empire, when they would go into these colonies, if you will, or into these lands that they occupied, that they would try to use as much local authority there as they could. We know Herod the Great had Jewish blood in him, and it would have not been unusual at all if this centurion had been a Samaritan, and who was, despite, not only was Jesus healing on behalf of a Gentile request, it was a Samaritan's request. And of course, the Samaritans were the most reviled, hated subset in all Palestine as far as the Jew was concerned. I just find that interesting. But regardless, he sends the Jewish elders to Jesus. Now, maybe the centurion was trying to make some kind of appeasement to Jesus through that. I don't know. But they appeal to Jesus he's asked you to heal this slave servant of his. He's paralyzed. He's near death. He's very tormented. And this centurion is worthy of you granting this request. Now, we said last week at the beginning of chapter 8 up here, as soon as he finishes the Sermon on the Mount, the text reads like, just as soon as he came down off the mountain, this leper approached him. Remember that from last week? I think that this is still very much in close proximity to this Sermon on the Mount. What was the gist of the Sermon on the Mount? You're not getting in. You've totally misunderstood the kingdom of God, how it works, who gets in, who doesn't. You think you're all getting in. Most of you aren't. And now he is giving them illustrations, real life illustrations of who's going to get in. Lepers who come in faith are going to get in. Gentiles of faith are going to get in, and Jesus is showing them this. And I've got a feeling, just like I said last week, that they had to have gasped when that leper came through the crowd to ask him to be healed, that they are equally flabbergasted that now Jesus is responding to a Gentile. And Jesus just kind of rubs that. He stops. He says, that verse 10, now when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. It goes back to what I was talking about, this book I want to write someday. He was amazed. Jesus reacted to this and said to those who were following, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. Go back to the Sermon on the Mount. Look here. What did Jesus just say? I hadn't found this kind of faith in any scribes. I hadn't found any of this kind of faith in the Pharisees. He's even saying at this point right here, I haven't found this kind of faith in the people that's going to be my disciples and eventually the apostles. Right now, this centurion's faith is bigger and more amazing to Jesus than even the faith of Peter, Andrew, James, John, the people following, because he hasn't seen this kind of faith in all of Israel. And what Jesus is telling the crowd right here when he says, truly I say to you, I've not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What's he saying? He is saying Gentiles are going to be coming from every direction, sitting at the kingdom table. And we covered all this in the end times class, if you'll remember. We covered all this all those months we were studying the book of Revelation. And Jesus is letting Israel know right now, these scribes and Pharisees who he has just preached this Sermon on the Mount to, I'm going to demonstrate my saving power with them through healing this centurion's slave boy. And you better know that when it comes time to sit at that table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, there's going to be a lot of people who y'all think aren't getting in is going to be there. Everybody get that? And he says the sons, verse 12, but the sons of the kingdom, who are the sons of the kingdom? Sons of the kingdom are Jews. Those are Israelites. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to apostate Israel? He tells us right here, but the sons of the kingdom will be thrown out into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You get it? The Jews who can't find that narrow road are going to hell. They're not getting in the kingdom. And he's just backing up what he just finished preaching in the Sermon on the Mount with this. By the way, Matthew uses that phrase a lot. Matthew 13, 42 and 50, he says they will be thrown into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Chapter 22, 13, the king, this is from a parable, the king said to the servants, tie his hands and feet, throw him into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth in that place. Matthew 24, 51, this is after the rapture. And he will cut him in two and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 25:30. And throw the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew uses that over and over and over again, and the Jews understood what that meant. The Jews understood that not getting in the kingdom meant going to a very, very bad place. So there's a lot of eschatological implications in this miracle. It's also very much an argument against supersessionism. Everybody remember from our end times class what that is? Those who want to believe that the church is now spiritual Israel, that the church has replaced the nation of Israel, this passage, I think very much is another argument against that, because it says that from the east and west, we're going to be spiritual offspring of Abraham, but Jesus still drew a distinction here. That he still separated out those from the east and the west. I just real quickly, I want to say one other thing about and then we'll go to this last miracle. If there's one thing I want people to understand about this miracle, and I put something on Facebook about this morning, those of you who read that, you hear so much in this charismatic movement about God's being willing to heal depends on how strong our faith is. I was at a healing service one time down in Leeds, Alabama. It was actually a motorcycle rally, and I didn't know I was about to get caught up in one of those, and I did. And it was just the most pitiful thing in the world. There was a boy there blind, and he came there expecting to be healed of that blindness, and of course it didn't happen. And just, boy, I look back on that. Herbie Shreve was the guy's name. His father was a Baptist preacher, started a thing called Christian Motorcycle Fellowship. And boy, I got involved in that. I thought this was a good thing. And boy, I got down there and his son had taken over this ministry and turned it into a healing ministry. By the way, his son is no longer involved anymore. His son now sells insurance somewhere. He's not even in Christian ministry. I don't think he's a Christian, a bit more than a goose. But they had this little 12-year-old boy up there, and they came on the expectation that Herbie could heal him. There was a couple of people from Dyersburg there with me. They can attest to all this. And it just made me so mad. It just made me so mad to set up a 12-year-old boy into believing that that's how it works now. And basically, the end of when a healing doesn't work, just like we're seeing this week, we got a losing party pointing fingers every direction whose fault it is. Well, when you go to a faith healing and the healing doesn't happen, they start pointing fingers at why it didn't work. And who do they always point the fingers at? They point the fingers at the one who didn't get healed. Just like they're pointing at that 12-year-old little boy. Well, his faith just wasn't enough. I want you to understand something about this miracle. There is nothing whatsoever in the text that suggests the paralyzed slave who was near death even knew somebody was praying on his behalf. It had nothing to do with how much faith he had. Jesus was responding to whose faith? The centurion's faith. Folks, never underestimate the power a born-again believer has in interceding for someone who can't or won't pray for themselves. Never underestimate the power that a truly born-again Christian, I'm not talking about a pretender, but one who is truly born again, never underestimate the power they have in affecting someone else and the good they can affect on someone else, even if that other person is paralyzed, incapacitated, may not be a believer themselves. And I think we have to pray for that person's salvation first and foremost. But if you are a born-again believer in Jesus Christ and are truly born again and saved, never underestimate how much power your prayer can have for the benefit of another and a loved one. Everybody got that? All right. Well, just very quickly, the third miracle, Matthew 8:14. We don't get the whole story here. Matthew 8:14, when Jesus came into Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her. Immediately, here again, meets all that criteria. And she got up and waited on him. Now later on, it says, now when evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and he healed all who were ill. In other words, he didn't weed out the easy ones. This happened so that what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet would be fulfilled. He himself took our illnesses and carried away, removed our diseases. There's one little added thing here. He comes back from the synagogue. Here's Mark's account. Here's Mark's account. I think this is really, you need this to get a full picture here of this miracle. Mark 1:29 says, and immediately after they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was lying sick with a fever, and they immediately spoke to Jesus about her. Does anybody catch that? Because 31, and he came to her and raised her up, taking her by the hand, and the fever left, and she served them. They're going to Jesus saying, she's sick. We want to eat. Can you put the word or the touch on her? We're ready to eat. Jesus answered the prayer, but adding that part, she's just been healed from. Now people won't talk about, well, that just shows you how completely and totally Jesus can heal. I believe that. But I wonder if it doesn't show us a little bit of the motivation behind those who asked him for the healing. Lord, we hungry. We ready to eat. Fix her. Not much else to add to there, and I've been going now for about 40 minutes, and y'all know that's that's where we try to stop. But I just want you to understand, Matthew is not only establishing Jesus' authority here, I think that's his main thing, but after preaching a sermon like the Sermon on the Mount, which was basically, you're not getting in, you're not getting in, you're not getting in, here's why, here's why, here's why. I'm just so thankful Matthew goes into this, because he's saying, before you get this idea that this Jesus of Nazareth is just some judgmental finger-pointing ogre, let me tell you about what else he was doing with people. Let me tell you about what else, how he was proving himself to be the Son of God, and the blessing that was coming out from his presence. So, you can ponder these things when you get home, consider them. I'm going to close with that. I'll come back in a couple weeks and pick up where we're going to leave off here.